Welcome to O's Across the Pond, the show covering all things Baltimore Orioles, but from a fresh European perspective. Join us for the highs, the lows, the heartbreaks, and everything in between. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just discovering Birdland, this is your home for passionate, across-the-pond Orioles talk. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of O's Across the Pond. This week joining me from Scotland is Grant. How are we, Grant?
Hi there, I'm okay, but not too downhearted after the weekend, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll keep on going, I'm sure they will. So this week we're going to obviously discuss the Athletic series. The Orioles had a lot of confidence going into that series after a sweep at home against the White Sox, then going out on the road to the Mariners and sweeping them. Could they carry that on into the Athletics? A series that, on paper, with the Athletics' previous form, it could have been seen as an easy series, but if you discount the previous form of the Athletics, and dismiss the fact that they had fallen off a cliff the last 20 games, there was always potential banana skins. We've had plenty of questions sent in to us via X and email, so we'll dive into the listener mailbag and answer them. And then we'll also take a quick look at the Tigers series when the O's get back to Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Will the Orioles be facing Tarek Skubal later on in that series? So we'll just game one. Grant, going into this, obviously I had a lot of confidence going into this, but I did think that the Athletics could potentially cause us a lot of issues.
It just felt a bit like the bubble burst after going for so well and thinking we've got the Athletics, and then to lose game one, it just deflated a wee bit, didn't it? You're going to get that. You're not going to go on these massive runs. Dean Kramer, I mean, he ground it out, but 5 1/3 innings, 8 hits, 5 earned runs. Some nights you get away with that, some nights you don't, and that was one of the ones we didn't. We ended up losing 5-4. So the relievers did do their job. They did keep us in the game, but just not enough. We didn't get anything off the Athletics.
The thing with Dean Kramer for me is, he was poor in the third inning, and I don't know whether I'm being too harsh on me, but he's one of those players, Kramer, where I think sometimes you look at him and you go, he's a solid piece in this rotation and he can do a job. And then there's days like game one where you sat there scratching your head thinking, how the hell is he still a part of this rotation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk about game two in a minute, but I think that is always going to be our problem with likes of Dean Kramer and Charlie Morton in the rotation. We are going to have games like that. I think we all thought that most of the time the offence will be good enough to get away with that, and that has proven the case in some of these games. But these guys are just not high ceiling pitchers, so you are going to get periods like that. And unfortunately, they kind of strung a few together in the last series there.
Yeah, I mean, some of the positives for me, Carlson, I think the pair of us have been quite happy with him, and I think we'll briefly talk about him again in a bit about big players coming back and off the IL. But going back to Sacramento, the hometown kid, he had a 2-run home run to get the show started. It's his third home run of the season now. And game one was a 7-game hit streak for him. Jackson Holliday, another home run for him. 3 hits against lefty pitching in this game. Again, it goes back to say, it's amazing what can happen when he's facing these pitchers and he's given a chance every single day. Into the bullpen for Sir Anthony Dominguez, two strikeouts at the bottom of the 7th. And then, we get into the 8th. Cowser got his first double of the season off Ferguson with 1 out. Gunnar comes in, pinch hitting for Mayo, works the walk. Carlson then works the walk, superb at bat. We ground that one out. And the bases are loaded with 1 out. Kerstad comes in, pinch hitting for Jorge Mateo. and you sat there just watching, thinking, avoid the double play, just avoid the double play, you know. And credit where credit's due, that's exactly what he did. He avoided the double play, but he gave
So I mean, what happened was the reliever was Ferguson had already faced the minimum, so he put the guys on, and I thought it was quite obvious that they were going to make a change. I didn't necessarily expect him to go to Mason Miller at that stage. They ended up doing that. So Kjærstad had been sitting there, I'm sure, quite expecting to get a chance. And then instead of the right-handed reliever, he's facing Mason Miller, throwing 101 at him. He did just happen to swing 3 of the hardest swings you've ever seen, and Miller dipped the ball under very nicely each time. It was like men against boys stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was just about to say it was Major League against Little League, and Miller being the Major League. And
the problem is, for as good as Mason Miller is, we've seen him being almost flawless. He was coming into the game with a slightly elevated ERA, so obviously there are players that have got hits and runs off him, but it was a pretty dismal effort from Kjærstad, unfortunately, and kind of goes along with a series of poor efforts. He did get into the Mariners series and get some production, but not on this occasion.
It's just not offering enough. There's just no consistency with him at the moment. And again, I think we will inevitably discuss him when we dive into the mailbag.
Right, we'll leave it till then, because there's Carlson as well.
And then we go into game 2 now. Before this game, Mansolino, and we've discussed Mansolino, and I understand, he's been thrust into this job. He come out with one of those quotes that he has a habit of coming out with, which kind of make you look twice. And is somebody with an active brain cell saying this quote? And it's just said, we took batting practice in the cages today due to the heat. It's 80 degrees. Now, I'm presuming Tony Mansolino has been in and around Baltimore mid-August, when the heat's in the 90s and the humidity's 100%, you're struggling to walk around. So, it was a bit of a weird one for me.
I think to play devil's advocate, Mansolino, I've watched the clips of his kind of post-match stuff.
Yeah.
I just think he's like a genuinely nice guy, and he wants to give reporters an honest account, and wants to give them stuff, and doesn't want to just sit and give these stock answers that you see so often with sports. But the reason that you do see these stock answers so often is because it's very easy for players and managers, anybody talking to media, to kind of get caught out and do it, say a slightly careless thing, like it's taken out of context. So I suppose from an elite sports point of view, you're not wanting to give the opposition too much hope that you're feeling the heat, literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, and then coming in obviously to this game, the O's have got quite a good record against Luis Severino, who was obviously starting on the mound for the Athletics. The averaging .432 against them. Just to name a few who've had success: Gunnar, Laureano, O'Hearn, Adley. So, I think he had a 4.54 ERA going into the game. So, for me, it was critical. You try and get into him early and get into the pen early.
Yep. And they didn't quite manage that, unfortunately. The Athletics get into Charlie Morton early. We did get some production off of Severino. I mean, they pushed him to 5 2/3, which was possibly a mistake. He gave up 6 runs, 5 of them earned. So we did get to him, and got enough off him to get him out of the game and get a win, as it was 7-4. Big story from our point of view was Charlie Morton having come off a fair run of probably 5 or 6 good appearances, including 2 starts, where he's either been good or very good. it was not good. 4-0 down, or 4-1 down in the first inning. So he gave up all 4 of his runs in the first inning. He did pitch into the third, 2 1/3, 6 hits, but 4 earned runs. Gave up 5 walks. Did strike out 5, but it doesn't really matter when you've given up. You've given up 4 runs like that so early, and had a 40-something pitch first inning. Which often you see people getting pulled at that stage. So I mean, fortunately, he did manage to kind of. I mean, we were thinking the worst at that stage, that this is going to be the game over. We were getting these flashbacks to the start of April again, weren't we? So he did manage to just keep us in it.
Yeah, I mean, talking of Charlie Morton, how was this for the stats? So, in 2009, Charlie Morton was Pirates teammates with Jack Wilson and faced Matt Holliday in a start versus the Cardinals. And then comes the present day, Charlie Morton is Orioles teammates with Jackson Holliday, Matt Holliday's son, and will face Jacob Wilson, Jack's son, in a start versus the A's. So just to give you an idea of how old and how long Charlie Morton has been around. Charlie Morton's start, as you've covered there, I was surprised that there was nobody warming up on the pen, earlier than what there was. I did think he was going to get pulled in that first, and it was reminding me of what we'd seen in April and what we saw. Although there wasn't the big as many big hits, it was reminiscent of Kyle Gibson's start against the Yankees, and you're just thinking this is going to get away from us. But also going 4-1 down in the first, if that was 3-4 weeks ago, me and you would have just turned the game off.
Well, I think if we were playing the Yankees, then it would have been game over at that point. So, you've got to say we got away with it against the A's. They let themselves down as much as anything else, striking out against them. And then the big story of the day was we turned to Matt Bowman, or Tony Manzanino turned to Matt Bowman, who came in 2 1/3 innings, no hits, no runs, no earned runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. Saved us. There was no way we were winning that game without that contribution. Got us into the game, allowed us to get some hits and get some runs off of Severino, and get a lead. And then the rest of the bullpen was almost as good. Aitken, Dominguez, Soto, Kittredge, Bautista all combined to give up a combined 2 hits, no runs, and
6 2/3, I think it was.
We got the win. So all 4 runs that we conceded were in that first inning off of Morton. Everybody came in, did as good a job as they could have done. Did more than enough to win the game, 7-4. As you talked about the offence, Henderson, Laureano, Cowser, all coming up with big hits and RBIs throughout the middle of the order. Exactly what we needed, because that's one thing that the games where we have got these hits, there's been a Kjerstad or a Rutschman in there that's just killed the momentum of an inning. So the fact that all those guys were in there, Holliday had a quiet night, but Rutschman, Henderson, O'Hearn, Laureano, Cowser all strung the hits together to get the runs, put us over the top. And that's the one thing that we've not done, even when some of the underlying stats are looking good and guys are going 2 or 3 for 4, 2 or 3 for 5. There's just a momentum killer in the lineup there, and that's the thing, we need to string these together.
I think with the offence, it starts with the defence for me. At the bottom of the 5th, that play by Gunnar Henderson. Well, Carlson, Gunnar Henderson and Maverick Hanley is outstanding. Carlson with that, the ball kind of comes off the fly ball, comes off the dirt, comes off the wall. And, well, before I carry on, this running, the warning track at the Athletics, I am a firm believer, and I've seen a few things now on social media, all warning tracks should be the same size at every ballpark. Regardless of the dimensions, we all know every ballpark has different dimensions, but the warning track is there for a reason. Now, I don't know how the exact measurements the Warren track was it the stadium in Sacramento, but and I'm not over exaggerating here, but it was the equivalent of a country mile. So that's me rant on that. But Carlson, great play.
I don't understand. I agree. I don't understand why they allowed that. I saw a bit of commentary that it was to match the Giants' field dimensions or field warning track, because that's a minor league group. But you shouldn't allow that. It's Mickey Mouse stuff. It's a major league stadium now. So have stricter rules and regulations. It's not something that's more expensive to change.
And I know. Jim Palmer was mentioned in Game 3 as well. There's quite a couple of teams who had been now to Sacramento have complained to the league over the standard of the turf and the dirt as well. And
the whole thing, walking out to centre field to warm up the batting cages again. What are they allowing here? They should never have allowed this never have allowed the Athletics to get away with that. If they want to move, build your stadium, and then move and do the work that you had to do to your existing stadium to at least have it, habitable, which by all accounts it wasn't towards last season.
Yeah, I think obviously I think the kind of plays it down to be there, I think, for 3 years, aren't they? So you're looking at they're not going to be in Vegas till 28, 29. Yeah. So,
and who knows how these things, if they've even started, these don't tend to be delivered exactly on time. So it could even be longer.
But yeah, so that play in the fifth, that kind of shift, kind of gave us a bit more momentum and confidence. And then you get into the top of the sixth, and Colton Cowser hits a ball from downtown Sacramento all the way back to Oakland. So, former Oakland Athletic fans, if you're missing baseball, have a look in your back garden, because there's going to be a Major League ball in your backyard. And then, obviously, Urias gets on base. A wild pitch gets him onto seconds. And then Carlson works a walk. And, another great at-bat from Carlson. Holliday, who's then next up, he's got 2 home runs, 20 RBIs with the runs and scoring position. He then brings in another run. So, at the end of that, the O's were 6-4. As you mentioned, the bullpen was superb, and we carry on and we take that win, and then kind of goes into Game 3. And watching that last night, it just felt flat.
Yeah, it was just almost back to the bad old Orioles of April. Again, biggest problem is the left-handed pitching against. So the Athletics managed to piece together 7 innings of lefty pitching from the starter, and then Newcomb came in, who we've seen before. Sean Newcomb, experienced guy, but just absolutely did a number on us. Thinking, right, we've got the starter out. Let's see if we can piece something together. 5-1 defeat. Sagano going not down, but giving up a lot of hits, a lot of contact in that second inning. He gave up 1 in the first.
Struggled, didn't he?
Yeah, and then 3 in the second, and he was slightly unfortunate. He was unfortunate in that a lot of the hits was relatively soft contact that just managed to get through.
He wasn't helped out by his defence either. No. I mean,
Rivera certainly let him down.
The one thing that this isn't anything against Rivera. I like him. He's at times he's done a job. He's done what he's had to do for us. He wasn't great yesterday at first base.
No.
However, when you going back, kind of looking at lefty pitching and hitting against lefties, you've sat Ryan O'Hearn, who can play first base, who, if you look at his stats this year against lefties, all right, it might not have been good enough it might have kept us in the game, but it just didn't make sense to me. You've got a day off. I know you're travelling back from the West Coast, but you've got a day off. Tigers, the first game against the Tigers, I think is 6 o'clock Eastern time. So why not play your best player in that position that you've got available? Obviously, Mountcastle is now out for 2 to 3 months, they've said. So, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, Rivera has really... He's only started kind of one game a series for the last few weeks, going back to Boston when he was in more often. My feeling is that, or certainly when he wasn't getting into these lineups and maybe not even getting off the bench, was that they kind of made the decision on Rivera, and that he is going to be DFA'd when probably Westberg comes back. So again, with Mayo up as a first base option, and obviously O'Hearn, who could have played against a lefty starter, he's certainly not been a disaster by any stretch of the imagination against lefties this year, given our struggles with everybody else.
I mean, I think O'Hearn's batting average against lefties this year starts with, is a .2. I think you look at Rivera, and I know Rivera's had considerably less at-bats, but his batting average against lefties starts with a .0.
Yeah, so I was surprised to see Rivera there. He didn't look that comfortable, unfortunately. And obviously, the other thing is Sagano. He is a contact pitcher, so you do need your best defence out there. Maybe they didn't think Mayo was going to be that either. Certainly, Rivera played much better third base, and even Arias might have played first base and done a job, worked out better for us in that sense. But there was a lot of those hits in the second inning that another night they would have ran into a fielder, ran into a double play earlier. But it did kind of feel at that point we were 4-1 down, and we were one swing away from basically being 6 or 7-1 down. So fortunately we managed to stay in the game. But after that we get the run in the second inning. Just very little. The whole night we were 8 hits. Rutschman a decent night again, 2 for 3, or a decent afternoon. But that was really the only kind of positive there. The lefty domination continues to bite us, and it doesn't look like we've found a solution, even with some of these righties coming back or being in the lineup. It didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I know they tried to kind of. They've made additions. We've talked about them, Laureano, O'Neill, etc., to kind of help us, because this lefty, it's not something that's new for this season. Any baseball fan would know that, any Orioles fan will know that. I know they've tried to do some work in the off season to bring players in. On the subject of one of those players I mentioned there, Ramon Laureano, obviously, it'd be fair to say he had his struggles when he first came in, but I've been impressed with him. I've been impressed with him recently, and I put a poll out yesterday on X, and I put a poll out in the WhatsApp group, just kind of, if the season ended today, would you take up Laureano's club option? It's 1 year, 6.5 million. Overall, it was unanimous. 80% on X saying yes, and the same result in the WhatsApp group. Now, for me, I know I'd messaged you this before, Grant, but it kind of makes... I don't think we're going to be sellers at the trade deadline. I think if it's 5, 6, 7 games back, it doesn't make sense to me. But I think one player that will definitely be gone at the deadline will be Cedric Mullins. So it makes sense. You trade Cedric Mullins, and you've got a kind of... Colton Cowles will be your everyday centre fielder next year. Then you've got Laureano, who can dive into the outfield, who can hit lefty pitching as a cheap, like kind of 1 year stopgap. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are.
So, I mean, I don't know about trade Mullins. If we're either going to be sellers or we're not going to be sellers, I don't imagine that we trade Mullins just because we get a big price for him. If we think we're still in the argument, but we'll see how. Basically, I think that's going to be results driven, depending on where we are and what our realistic chances are of making a run, or at least being competitive in the playoff odds. In terms of Laureano, I was a sceptic when we signed him. I thought it was depth for the sake of depth. We were already going to have Mullins, Cowser, O'Neill and Kjerstad. We're all going to make the opening day roster. seemed to me that they all had much higher ceilings than Laureano. And I wondered if we would even see a lot of game time. Certainly at the start he didn't. They kind of got him in against lefty pitching. He didn't do a lot. But then as some of the injuries kind of piled up, he got into more and more games. And he's had a very good season, after that kind of slow start. Over the whole course of the season, he's now got a 275 batting average, OPS of 876, which is pretty handy. I think league average generally about 750 or just under that. So consider the slow start. He was a 653 OPS in March and April. He's been over 1,000 in that stat column for May and June, albeit June a small sample size, 5 or 6 games. And then when we tack on the second half of last season, or certainly the last 2 months of last season, he was with Atlanta, played 67 games, and he had similar numbers for them as he has for us so far this season. So that's almost a full year, a full season of sample size, and he's above average, batting average and OPS. Very productive, really, as a right-handed outfielder. Can play pretty decent outfield. They've not pushed him in centre field very often, but I think they could do that if required. And especially for somebody who was kind of effectively signed as a depth piece or a platoon batter, maybe to bat with Cowser against lefties, or platoon with Cowser or Mullins. One thing, ironically, he's not done is hit left-handed hitting. That was kind of one of the reasons he was signed along with O'Neill and Sanchez. He's got over the season, he's got a 647 OPS against lefties, compared with a number of 1,013 against righties. So he's been much better, or you see a lot more righty pitching. So even certainly under Manslino, he was very few lefty starters that we faced. So, but he has been good against lefties in the past. That was one of the reasons we signed him. So there is potential there, better numbers to unlock if he can get into those games with the lefty pitchers and actually do the job that we hired him to do. With regards to club option, as I said, I'm not convinced we'll trade Mullins unless we're trading everybody. And even then, Mullins would still be one of those guys that we could hold for a qualifying offer. If his fitness is shaky, whatever, then maybe we won't be able to do that. But I don't imagine why we would have put that option into Laureano's contract if we weren't going to pick it up. The fact that he's played well, so assuming that he gets through the season without any massive drop off or fitness issues, it's likely that we will do that. As I said, I think Mullins will be moving on. I don't think we're going to extend him. You never know. Maybe, well, even if you pick Laureano up for $6.5 million, it's not the end of the world. You could trade him, or you could eat that $6.5 million if there was some scenario where Mullins or somebody else was available and signed. So perhaps he is there. He's going to bridge that gap to likes of Dylan Beavers, or even Enrique Bradfield Jr. coming up. Beavers is having a very good season. Triple A. He's had some kind of recent injury, but he's back. He's had a good weekend. He's looking like one of the best hitters in Triple A. Does not play centre field much at all, though. He's really perceived as a corner outfielder. So I suppose that's what they see Laureano as. We'll see how that unfolds. I would imagine if there is any serious injuries in the outfield, that he's now one of the names that they would be thinking of calling up this season at some point.
Yeah, I watched the Tides game the other day. I've been impressed with Beavers all year. I know he's had a bit of an injury, another one he's been mentioning quite a lot, and we talked about him with Jake Carver-Meyer. I spoke to him about him with Steve Maluski. That episode's just dropped. It was Samuel Basayo. The kid's mashing it down there, but the issue for him is, unless there's now an injury at third or first, he's not going to be coming up, because obviously you've got Sanchez coming back to back up Adley.
We'll talk about the roster moves then, because at the moment rehabbing in Norfolk is Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah.
Is Jordan Westberg. Is Sanchez is going to come back, I would imagine is going to come back and deputise Catch and Handley will be back down. Sanchez has a few hits in AAA. You're not going to, he's a veteran guy, you don't want to take too much out of AAA form, but he's got a higher ceiling than what we saw from him early in the season, so I don't imagine, given the salary they're paying him, that we're going to mess about too much with Maverick Handley. As well as he's done behind the plate, he's not hit a lot, unfortunately for him, so I think he's back. So when we have those moves, we've also, he's not rehabbed, but we'll get Cedric Mullins, who is now 10 days on the IL, is eligible to come back. He apparently is running, I don't know, I would imagine that he could come back in without a rehab start, given how short time he's missed. We've not heard anything concrete on that, whether they're going to push him. I don't imagine they're going to push him at this stage in the season, given that Cowser's in there and can play centre field. But possibly by this time next week, we will have O'Neill and Mullins back on the roster. We've talked about Kjærstad before. I don't see how they would be able to keep Kjærstad on the roster at this stage. Even I think Kjærstad is probably the first move, assuming O'Neill comes back for the Tiger series. Problem is O'Neill hasn't done that well either, but given his contract situation and the fact that he can't be optioned, obviously they could mess about and leave him on the IL for a bit longer. I don't think they're going to do that to protect Kjærstad's roster spot at this stage, given unfortunately how poor he's been. I do think it'll be good for Heston to go back down, take the pressure off him a wee bit, and hopefully find something, because he just looks like a guy with no confidence at the moment. So I would imagine that's the first move. The second move, which probably is going to be Mullins coming back in terms of the outfield, it looks that would mean Dylan Carlson is optioned, which effectively means that we're playing O'Neill ahead of Carlson, because Mullins is not fighting for a fourth outfielder spot, but O'Neill would be in terms of his performance, and that is something that could go wrong, because Carlson's been really good for us. Certainly after a slow start, he's got into the game. He's switch hitter, so he's very easy to fit in the lineup. He's almost been good enough to start moving up the lineup if he really wanted to. So that is one that's interesting to watch, given that he has been a first round pick. That he's obviously bounced about. There's a reason why he's no longer with his original club. But we've got him. He's under team control for a few years. He does have options, so he can be optioned. It does feel that if O'Neill is as bad as he was at the start of the season, then we're kind of weakening our team there a wee bit. So I suppose that's the decisions that people have to make and decide if that's what's going to happen. I assume it is. O'Neill's certainly had some success in Norfolk. Again, they don't want to read too much into that, but that's probably the moves that are going to happen. I think Westberg comes up Tuesday, Rivera's DFA'd. I don't think that's a big decision. That is going to be really handy to have him back. If we can get going, then that is a top of the order lineup. Maybe a number 4 hitter. We'll see how he fits in.
Yeah, so I mean, we were going to dive into the mailbag, but Grant's kind of just answered all the questions there in a little 10-minute period. So obviously Brian had asked about Seddy's return. So Brian, I hope Grant's answered your questions there.
Yep.
And obviously with Westy coming back, Birdland Flock via X, I think your question's kind of been answered there. The other one that we did have was Adam V via X. Do you have hope that the Orioles will be able to turn the season around and earn a wildcard spot? Now, I personally think going into that third game against the Athletics, I think we were 7.5 games back of the wildcard, 11 back of 500, and I've said it on the other episode, everyone's just focusing on this, you need to get to 500, you need to get 500. I think the second half of the season is just, it's going to depend on what we do over these next 6 weeks before the deadline. I think, Grant, you'll have a more well-rounded view on it. I still think there is a chance, but I think I looked at it the other day. What did I put in the group? We needed, I think, 87 wins is the average since this new wildcard spot has come in. So you look at that, gives you a rough idea of what we need to be doing between now and the end of September. However, I'd just focus on the next 6 weeks first. We need to see where we are in these 6 weeks, Grant.
Yeah. So to get to 87 wins, so I did have some stuff that I wrote before Game 3 yesterday that I'll go through. But after we lost that game, to get to 87 wins, we need to go 61 and 37 in the remaining 98 games, which is playing to a 622 winning percentage. Not impossible, but it is impossible without putting a run, another run that we've seen where it's six or 8 or 9 games, because we don't. Well, let's just go into it. So, what I had written, even before we'd lost Game 3, when we were obviously hopeful that we would finally get the win, especially with Sagano pitching. But I think it'll be difficult. The plan for the Orioles, by Mike Elias, not by anybody else, was always that we would have an average rotation, but the hitting and the relievers would carry us at least over 162 games. You can argue if that would work in the playoffs. It's probably not the best playoff strategy, but over 162 games, it could have worked, and it might still work. I don't see room in that plan for being 16 and 34, which is what we were after Game 1 of the Boston doubleheader before we won Game 2 and went on a run. And as good as the last few weeks have been, especially to see some solidity from the rotation, get a good number of wins under our belt, and start feeling that we can come from behind, we can do all these 2023 Oriole things, we can have Felix Bautista pitch, the 9th inning with a 1-run lead, that we could turn the season around. But the harsh reality, as we've seen over the weekend, is that this is still a rotation that contains Dean Kramer and Charlie Morton. Trevor Rogers, the next man up, who probably very much in the same kind of column as those two guys in terms of what he can produce, which, yes, on his day is good and good enough, but it's not going to be 8, 9, 10 starts in a row. He's going to have some bad starts in there. And it's still an offence, again, even through this much better form, that has rarely scored more than 5 runs a game. Yes, there's players hopefully coming back that could turn that around, as we've discussed. But they've not done it yet. And even with some of the better players, even with Cowser having a good spell, there's still only been that one game over the weekend where they got more than 5 runs. And as I said, as things stand, we would need to play 622 baseball to get to 87 wins. You don't necessarily need 87 to get a wild card. 85 could be enough. 86 was enough for the last few seasons.
Yeah.
But we're arguing over. I suppose if you get to close to that, then at least you've had a go at it, and you might still say it's been a positive season, given the start we've had, that we've kind of been in the argument, and we've been still playing relevant baseball down the stretch for the last few weeks of the season. I just think we'll get too many players like Dean Kramer and Charlie Morton that will unfortunately let us down. And what we would need is the offence to go on an absolute tear, win games out of the park, win games 10, 12, 14 runs. And take the kind of pitching out of the equation, and have 5 1/3, 5 hits, 4 runs being a good enough start, which is what some of these guys are going to give us. So that's my feeling. Unfortunately, being pessimistic, obviously easy to be pessimistic when we've just lost a series 2-1 against the Athletics, but although I do enjoy watching the wins, it's been much more exciting to be looking at the standings and thinking, right, what do we need to do? Who have we got coming up?
Yeah.
I still think we've got too much to do.
On the subject of who we've got coming up as well, you look at, I think between now and that All-Star break, there is every series is tough, but unless you're playing the Rockies and the White Sox every week, do you know what I mean? But that doesn't happen. There's another 16, 15 teams that we've got to play. It just doesn't look. I say I've still got hope, but it's, we've got Tigers obviously this week. We've got the Angels. I know we look at it and go, every set is a must win, but obviously coming up against the Tigers and then the Angels, they kind of think if we can get one win against the Tigers and then possibly pick up 3 against the Angels to try and balance the week out, I don't know, but
the way I see it going is, for us to get involved, we need. I mean, okay, we've only lost the series 2-1. We're still going, a 4-2 road trip, which you can make that work. But what we would need to do to get properly involved is go on a run, and maybe this is part of a run where we've had 2 defeats there, but go on a run where we win 12 or 15 games out of 18. And that puts us back into the argument. We're not going to play this. We can't play this 4 or 5 run baseball and expect to win at a 600 plus pace.
No,
it's not going to happen.
I mean, you just look at June. Obviously, Tigers this week, the Angels at home, and then you've got on the road to the Rays and the Yankees. And we played the Rays twice, the Rangers twice. Before June's over, so there is opportunities there, but as I say, the little win streak was great, but we're going to need another 4 or 5 of them at least, just to try and get back up there. So talking of the Tigers, they venture on down from Motor City down to Oriole Park. We've won 4 of 6 now out on the road. We're coming back home. Players coming back off the IL. The Tigers have announced their starters for the 3 games. So, game 1, they're going up against Sawyer Simpson Long, who's got an ERA of 7.36, no wins. I think he's only had one game, I think. Only
pitched in 1 game there, so.
Yeah. And then Casey Mize in game 2, ERA at 2.91, 6 wins and a loss, and then we come up against the best. Is he the best in the league? I'd put him up there. You come up against Screwball, who a lot of people thought that did he pitch last night for the Tigers, or was it the night before?
I need to check that.
I think I don't know whether it was last night. It might have been the night before. So there was an inkling maybe that he wouldn't pitch again on Monday. But they've announced that he is going to pitch on Monday. I know that the O's haven't yet to announce any starters. Grant.
So we are yet to announce starters. I don't know if that is just because we're flying back from California, but perhaps we're going to try something. If we stuck to our order, it would be in the order Povich, Eflin, Kramer would be the 3. But perhaps they are going to mix things up and insert Trevor Rogers into the equation. Rogers did pitch for Norfolk on Saturday, so even if they were going to bring him up, we would at least probably see Povich and Eflin in the first 2 games, because I don't think they would want him to start having pitched 6 2/3 for Norfolk. Gave up 11 hits and 2 runs in that game. You got to assume he was playing with fire a little bit with 11 hits, but he got through the innings, and including his spot start in Boston, with the other games in AAA that he's now had 4 consecutive starts where he's given up 2 runs or less. So, he has shown a bit of form at least. From that point of view, if you were going to try and mix things up. So there was some debate on social media over the weekend about whether we would promote Rodgers, and that would allow us to use Povich in the pen, given the lack of lefty relief options that we've got now. Or we've certainly got Soto and Aiken, but we don't have Perez, thankfully. I mean, I think Povich's stuff would play really well in the pen, and I guess that would be one way of kind of getting all your guys on the field, and you know, got this kind of spare relief spot that's kind of bounced about with Bowman and Blewett now is in that spot. So there is a space there. I'm not sure if they'd be keen to kind of put Povich into that relief role, and then, you know, maybe he loses his starting length over the next few weeks, and then he's required suddenly to start. I don't know if that's a big enough factor, or whether they just want to get, you know, throw everything at this next few weeks and see if they can get the results. We'll find out. As I said, we've talked about this before. Hypothetically, it's still hypothetical because we don't know. We've not heard anything official, or not heard anything from the beat writers that Rodgers is going to come up. But that would be one way of doing it. You know, other six-man rotation, I don't think they're going to do that.
On Rodgers, I am a little bit surprised that we haven't seen him again since obviously that start. I know Jake Calvin-Meyer was fairly confident that we were going to see him in that White Sox series at some point, and I don't know, as you say, with him pitching at the weekends, I don't know what they're going to do.
Especially
with
the fact he went 6 2/3.
Yeah.
You know, if they were thinking of using him, then pitch him for 2 innings and then pull him. So as I said, I don't know why they've not announced. Usually it kind of unfolds. Maybe it was just a lack of people covering the game, that nobody asked a question, or I didn't see if it was evaded or not. But usually by now you would have the starters announced, even informally, but not seen anything. So I don't know. It seems unusual, but I think we probably will see Povich, Eflin, Kramer, unless there's a spot starter that comes up. Povich goes to the pen, and then Rodgers comes in the next night, whatever, Wednesday or Thursday. We'll see. As I said, it's. I think we will see Rodgers at some point, and if you're going to take a risk with the roster, even though that's a relatively minor risk, if you're going to take a risk with the roster, then now's the time to do it, when we need these results, and just see if Povich I think will work and it does improve us, because he has had these dominant innings, you know, and then he just kind of runs into trouble after 3 or 4 innings. So it is possible that would work.
I think with Povich, I did say, me and Andy were on Thursday or Friday, I can't even remember now. I was impressed with Povich in that game against the Mariners, and we've discussed it. I think he was the next one in that rotation that was now under pressure. Obviously, because Morton had a decent run, and was he going to get drop back down to AAA or what? I don't know whether they will throw him in the pen. I
mean, I don't think Povich has been, although we've talked about it, that he was maybe a bad start away, especially with Rodgers looking good. I don't know.
Could you see Morton going back in the pen?
I mean, I think if he has another outing, like he did this weekend, yes. As I say, I don't think we'll DFA him, but I mean, I would expect Morton to kind of bounce back and be reasonably solid again. But we don't know. I mean, strange things happened in that.
When's Morton next going to pitch then? Probably game 2, the Angels.
He would certainly. So that was Saturday. No, I think it'd be game 1 would be his next scheduled start. So it may be they do bring Rodgers up, but as I said, I think Povich is going to start that first game. unless there's some rejigging that they've not announced, but we'll find that out in the next, probably by the time this is released. People will know. With regards to the Tigers, that's going to be really difficult. They are the best team in the major leagues. They've got a 43-24 record. They have a top 10 offence. They have a top 10 pitching staff, and their starters are actually better than that. They rank 4th in batting average against. They rank 3rd in ERA, which is 3.08 for the starters, or for all players that have started games for them. So we will need to have absolutely everything going for us. They swept us in Detroit earlier in the season. They have been a much better home team than they have an away team, albeit still a relatively small sample size, so that is one chink of light. But they do appear to be the real deal. We saw them putting a huge run together at the end of last season to get into the playoffs, where everybody thought they were done, and they were just throwing all sorts of wild tactics, openers, everybody, all hands on deck, get these games over the line and get into the playoffs. So as long as they haven't done a 2024 Orioles and start the season hot and then cool down when the playoffs come, we would expect them to be right there, September, October. And certainly very exciting team to watch.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what happens, I think it's going to be a very tough series. I mean, I have a lot more faith in the bullpen. Obviously, what the bullpen have done the last kind of 10 games, but it's a concern that if the bullpen hadn't been that good the last 10 games, the offense hasn't, as you say, the offense hasn't been. We are close to falling apart again, and that's the major concern.
Yeah. Anyway, we've been instructed to finish on some positives, even though Simon is not here. He's on message.
He's in some moody hotel, I think, down in London off the M1. I don't know what he's up to. I just know he packed some binoculars and he was going. He said he was working at night. So Simon, I hope you enjoy whatever you're doing, mate.
Okay. Well, my positive is, and you might have stolen it from you, is that Jordan Westberg is almost certainly going to be called up for Tuesday night's game. He is one of our best hitters. He's one of the hitters that gets the hits when we need them. He's got a kind of real presence of mind, a kind of a clutch factor that other guys don't have. So that could be a difference maker if we are going to go on a run and get ourselves right back into it. If he is back.
He's like a tin of Ron Seal, isn't he? He does what it says on the tin. You know what you're getting with Westberg.
Yeah, I mean the numbers are not monster numbers, but they don't drop off when there's a guy in second base like they do with other guys. He still gets those guys, gets them over, gets them in. And
you look at the record without Westberg in the team compared to when he's in.
Yeah. So that's my positive, that we're going to get that. That is going to probably be the biggest piece of the injury puzzle that we're going to get back now that Eflin's up and running. That was probably the second most important player that been IL'd this year.
My positive, I kind of got two. So Kobe Mayo looks like he's kind of recently, he's come back up. Originally, we didn't think it was going to be for a prolonged stint, but obviously with the news that Mountcastle is now, they've said 8 to 12 weeks, but with a hamstring, I'll probably give him the 12, so you're looking at...
Yeah.
That takes until September. We might have seen the last of Mountcastle this season when you look at it like that.
Yeah, I think that possibly does help Mayo quite a bit, that he can, especially if Rivera's sent down tomorrow or option tomorrow, that he's on the roster and it's his spot, and he's probably not. It's not like he's 2 bad games away from missing out. He's going to play most days, certainly 2 out of 3 games he's going to play. So hopefully that does help him. We thought that would help Kjærstad, but it's not really. So he looked a bit more confident. He looks to have a bit more of a swagger than
Kind of looks like
than Kjerstad has had.
Looks like he kind of. I think he gets the feeling now, and maybe this is because of the news that Mountcastle's effectively done now to the end of the season, that he can't, like, he now belongs here. He knows that now he has this. He's got a prolonged period. Obviously, unless he goes 0 for 40 or something, you know, that's going to be it. But
the other dynamic that we've not spoken about today is John Maybury and whether that has had an effect. You know, we've seen him working with the players. Mayo spoke about him, that he's working with John Maybury. So that could be something that does help turn it around if he can get in. And, you know, I do think the Orioles have had a very kind of one-size-fits-all prescriptive approach. We're going to hit home runs or we're going to play small ball. But hopefully with a more experienced kind of person in there, he's going to talk to guys individually and say, this is your game, this is what you're good at, this is what we're going to focus on. You know, we've seen it, Holliday kind of maybe change his approach slightly to just get on base, get the hits. It's worked really well.
Also, the way, I mean, I've been critical of him, and, you know, I've even got as far to say is he could be batting number 9 in the line of Adley Rushman. Look at since John's come in, all of a sudden the kind of switches changed now on Adley, and he's got rid of that. He was another one who had this big stride, like, you know, kind of like a front step, and he's got rid of it, and now he's starting to hit the ball. So, you know, this week we've got plenty of guests on, so maybe that's something that we can sit down and talk to them about and look into ourselves with John. Maybe the other positive I had was down on the farm. We just covered it a little bit before, but the pipeline coming up, you know, Samuel Basayo, I said last night, I don't care what anybody says, that he is elite. That he can crush a ball. Dylan Beavers, you know, it's exciting to see that these players are possibly be up come September, if not definitely. You know, spring training is going to be huge for them, and a few of them might have a chance of making in that opening day roster.
Yeah, and I mean, Judd Fabian's another outfielder. 12 home runs in Norfolk. You know, he's not got a great batting average, but he's obviously got some pop there. So if you can kind of find that, you know, it's probably easier to teach the other things than the power. But yeah, Basayo is 13 home runs in Norfolk, and he's not played a lot because he missed a lot at the start of the season, so he's only played 39 games. Yeah, he has definitely got something. He's still only 20, so I don't think he's into next man up territory, but I would hopefully expect to see him when the rosters expand in September.
As I say, I think Samuel Basayo probably would have been my next man up, but there just isn't the room for him unless.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was an injury to Ryan O'Hearn or a trade for Ryan O'Hearn, that kind of creates that spot that maybe you'd say, is it worth having a look at Basayo rather than giving that back to Kjerstad? We'll see. As I said, I think the next 5-6 weeks, or not even that, probably the next 3 or 4 weeks, are very important as to how the rest of that season pans out. And if we do end up selling, then we hopefully will correspondingly bring these guys up a bit earlier. We know Elias doesn't like to start the service time too soon, but that's the opportunity to do it, to get these guys up, get them into the games, and hopefully then start next season. Well, as well, you know who you need. You know if some of these guys are going to have an impact. You don't need to buy somebody to replace them. Beaver's probably being one of those guys that could be ready to come up and do a job in the outfield for us next season. Yeah, so that I suppose that's the positive. If the season doesn't improve enough, that we will get an extended look at a lot of these guys in the farm.
Just a quick one before we go. This is a question from myself to you, Grant. This hasn't been sent in to us. You may notice yesterday or the day before, the Astros DFA Forrest Whitley. He was a Mike Elias pick. Now, people look at the stats and that the kid has got a nice bit of solid work around him. Obviously, his ERA struggled enough for him to be DFA'd. But we also know that Mike Elias doesn't like failures and he doesn't want to give up on people. Could you envisage that there might be... there's always going to be there with a link with Elias.
It would not surprise me because it is a kind of Elias move. And as I said, we do have this kind of roster spot that at the moment Scott Blewett has got. So there in theory you could. I mean, I don't think it's worth DFAing Scott Blewett for Forrest Whitley.
No.
It doesn't make sense. It'd be worth DFAing Scott Blewett to move Povich to pen and pitch Trevor Rogers. That would improve the number of active players. So there's obviously a reason why he's been DFA'd. He's got a 12.27 ERA in 5 games this season. Yeah, it's. I would hope we're kind of past those lottery ticket moves that we've seen in the past.
As you say with Elias, he doesn't like failures. It's one of his picks. I think was he the number 2 pick in 2016?
Overall, pick 17th, round 1 by the Houston Astros. Yeah. So I mean that's a high pick for somebody that is currently pitched.
It's a high pick for Elias on a pitcher.
Currently pitched 8 major league games total for the Houston Astros over 2 seasons. So
maybe there's something else there. Then,
hopefully, I'm saying hopefully doesn't go for it, but he's 27 and he's not a major league player at this stage really. So hopefully we're past those lottery tickets, but see how the next couple of days. But
for me, just a final thought on our old friend Craig Kimbrell. That was just an absolute bizarre situation with the Braves the weekend.
So he's gone again.
But obviously he went there DFA, took a minor league contract to come back up.
Yeah,
it's gone through obviously AAA. They've DFA'd Blewett to bring Kimbrell up. He comes up, and then they've DFA'd him the next day. And you think, I mean, maybe it's me romancing sport, but this is somebody who was looking forward to getting back to Atlanta, and it was just a weird one to kind of treat him like that.
I think the fans are angry because we've talked about Blewett on here before. The fact that we kind of DFA'd him after he'd done well in 2 games. Braves picked him up straight away, started him. He's obviously he's got decent numbers with them. And now they've basically thrown him away again, and we've got him. Whether he sticks or not, we'll find out. But he certainly had a good outing yesterday for us, or certainly a decent outing. So we will be back to review Scott Blewett and others Thursday night, Friday morning.
Thursday night. It's a busy week on the pod this week. We've got Paul Maracano on from the Baltimore Banner. We're taking a little trip down to Aberdeen on Thursday. Not Aberdeen by you, Grant. Aberdeen down in Single A. We'll discuss. It'd be an ideal time to ask some questions on what the likes of Fabian, Basayo, Beavers were like down there, and what goes on. So, Grant, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Pleasure.
Listeners. As I said the other day, we've reached over 1,000 streams and downloads now, so thank you very much. Only can continue growing. Hopefully there is some big news coming out in the next few weeks as well, which will benefit the pod and our community over here. So thank you for listening. Grant, thank you. Bye now.
Thanks.
That's it for this episode of O's Across the Pond, bringing Birdland to Europe one episode at a time. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow along as we keep the Orioles conversation going from this side of the Atlantic. Until next time, stay loud, stay proud, and let's go O's!